Welcome to Justice Counts, the podcast that goes beyond the law to what's important to you. Equal justice for all is a guidepost for our nation, but how do we achieve that? Here are your hosts, writer-commentator Bob Gaddy and novelist-attorney Mark M. Bello.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us today on Justice Counts. Even though it's winter and a long ways away from spring training, we're going to talk a little baseball today. Our guest is Jordan Skopp, who, among other things, is leading a fight to get rid of a longtime baseball rule that prevents fans who are injured by batted balls to receive compensation in court, no matter how badly they're hurt. Well, you might say that fans are accepting the risk when they buy those tickets so they can have the best view or have a great chance of getting a ball for a souvenir. Hell, I do that. But Jordan thinks it's wrong that fans can't sue for damages if they're hurt, and he's leading a drive called Foul Ball Safety now and is writing a book on the topic. In other words, he's looking for a little baseball justice. So we thought it would be great to have him as a guest on Justice Counts with Mark Bello. Mark, as you all know, is an attorney, a social justice attorney, and he's a guy who's written a number of books ripped from the headlines that deal with justice. So welcome, Jordan, to our show.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks.
Jordan, welcome to Justice Counts. Thanks for being here. As I was saying before we hit the record button, before we get to the interview, I want to set the table a little bit. You're first of all, you're not a lawyer, correct?
Not a lawyer. Come from one, but not a lawyer.
And what caused you to be interested in foul ball safety?
Yeah, just a huge baseball fan, and just really aware of the risks for a long time. The balls were shooting into seats like pinball machine, and thought it wasn't appropriate that fans were sitting in certain sections and being possibly nailed by one of these balls.
But why that particular issue? I mean, you could say I want to protect kids in cars by making them have car seats. I want to protect drivers by airbags. Why foul ball safety? Are you a big baseball fan or what?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Huge baseball fan. Still an active baseball fan for sure. Sure. There was one incident that really got me going, and it was a well notarized case in Houston with a little girl getting slammed with a ball, like a 2-year-old girl, and I thought this could happen any day, any time, and most families probably have no business being there. So I thought, let me look further into it. And 2 years plus later, I'm still at it.
So you're just a pissed off man like me and Bob. Is that correct?
Absolutely.
Pretty much, yeah.
I can appreciate that. There's no distinction, by the way, between fair and foul. I mean, from the standpoint of a guy sitting in left field, and let's say I don't know, Jose Altuve lines a ball into the stands in left field and hits somebody in the head.
Yeah,
that's probably
inappropriate as well.
Less assumption of the risk, I would presume.
Oh yeah, oh for sure. I actually just added a new video to the website, so people may be crying foul, no pun intended, of a fair ball. John Carlos Stanton hit the ball at 106 and hit the kid within 2 seconds at Yankee Stadium in the short porch, and it hit him in the head.
You know, I'm glad you mentioned the speed, because in a typical baseball game, I would imagine that 30 to 40 balls, let's call them projectiles, are sent into the stands, some of them over 100 miles an hour. And Major League Baseball knows this is going to happen 30 to 40 times a game.
Yeah.
Don't they have some duty to protect their customers? I don't know. That blows my mind.
Yeah, I think since 14-year-old man died in 1970, it was probably time to have an honest discussion. And I'm surprised the regulation organizations didn't come along and say, well, if you're not going to mandate netting, we're going to do it for you. But it's still 2021 and it still hasn't happened as of yet. So.
The little gentleman you're referring to, a 14-year-old kid by the name of Alan Fish.
Yep.
Got hit by a line drive off the bat of Manny Alou.
Manny Moda. I think it was Manny Moda.
52 years ago.
Yep.
I mean, now they've installed the netting, so that's a positive, I suppose. By the way, an interesting little side note that maybe you guys don't know about. Apparently, Alou's own son, some 14 years or so after that happened, gets struck by lightning on a baseball field. So it
may have been Manny Moda. Double check that.
Moda. All right.
Maybe Manny Moda. That's what I've been under the impression of. And then, yes, I did hear about the lightning.
The ghost of Alan Fish got even, I guess.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Essentially, though, Major League Baseball has had hundreds of serious injuries or maiming cases and 2 deaths. There's a lady, a 79-year-old woman named Linda Goldblum, same shit.
Yeah.
2018, she gets killed by a batted ball, right?
Yep, 93 miles an hour behind home plate in the low section. Dodgers took exactly a year to elevate, whether the other 29 other teams elevated net, but it's usually always in a reaction, not a prevention kind of mode. And that's baseball's modus operandi.
Interesting that both cases happened in
Dodger State. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
To give our listeners some legal history about this has been around since 1900. The so-called baseball rule that you're railing against is not unusual, surprisingly. Corporate to citizen. And I don't know if you're aware of this or not, but I listened to your podcast with Bob on Not Fake News.
Yep.
And I think you drew an analogy to a boulder falling off a building and striking someone on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
That there would automatically be liability.
Yep.
And that may or may not be true. It's not automatic.
Right.
There has to be negligence.
Right.
The situation.
If the owner had advanced knowledge that the bricks were loose and coming down on a regular basis, and that could be proved, then there you go.
You're absolutely right, and that's my problem with this whole line of cases.
Yeah.
And the theory, I think, for you going forward that you need to consider is changes in the law that have happened since 1910. 1910 is a long time ago.
Yep.
And at the time, the standard of for proving these cases, the standard has always been reasonable care.
Mm-hmm.
That hasn't changed.
Okay.
What has changed is the standards for assumption of risk, which is what we're basically talking about, what Bob referred to as choosing a seat in a place where a ball is likely to come. So the argument would be, hey, you chose to sit there, you knew balls were going to enter that particular section, you've assumed the risk, no liability.
Right.
Problem with that? Yeah, the problem is the baseball stadium knew, just like you did, that that's a place where fans can get hit and hurt by a ball.
Mm-hmm.
Yet they allow people to sit there.
Yep.
So when you talk about assumption of risk as a drop-dead defense using what's called contributory negligence,
mm-hmm.
that's an old standard. And only 4 states, actually 3 states and DC, still have contributory negligence laws. What we have today now, and it's very important in these cases, is comparative negligence laws. And I don't know what conversations you've had with lawyers,
mm-hmm.
but I think you need to focus on this
mm-hmm.
in your fight going forward. And that is 13 states, by the way, have pure comparative negligence. Let me tell you what that is. And
mm-hmm.
you can comment. And I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but it's important for your crusade.
Hopefully our crusade.
All right, fine.
Yeah.
Comparative negligence Pure comparative negligence is
Mm-hmm.
you're driving along,
Mm-hmm.
you run a red light. The person who has the green light has an opportunity to stop and doesn't, plows into you, and kills you. Now, you would say you ran the red light, you're at fault, you can't collect a dime. Pure comparative says if the guy that ran the green had an opportunity to stop, and let's call that 5%, and you're guilty of 95%, then a verdict of $100,000 gets you $5,000.
Right.
Okay, that's pure comparative. It's not a lot of money. It's not going to set the world on fire, but it is, if you think about it, a much fairer way to determine compensation.
Mm-hmm.
Most states, though, have repudiated that, and they have gone to a modified comparative negligence standard.
Mm-hmm.
That's either 50-50 or 51-49.
Mm-hmm.
Now, let's get back to the analogy of sitting in a seat. Do you think, as a layperson,
Yep.
that evaluating it that way, where it's a 50-50 question, is the fan more than 50% responsible or less than 50% responsible when he might be just a fan, a casual fan who's sitting there for the first time,
Right.
or maybe sitting there for the 10th time,
Right.
versus a baseball stadium who knows that 25, 30 balls go in the stands every day.
Right. Yeah, obviously less.
All right. You know what? You guys are talking about all this legal stuff. I'm a baseball fan. I like to go to baseball games, and I like to sit where the ball's going to come and I can get it and then go get an autograph. All right.
Right.
I like to do that. I like to do that for myself, for my grandkids, for some little kid sitting next to me that I don't even know. All right. So I'm sitting in left field. Jose Altuve hits a screaming line drive at 110 miles an hour, comes into the stands. If there's a net there, that ball is going to be stopped. There has to be then a new rule from the stadium. Is that a home run? What is it? Is it a ground rule double? What is it? This screws up the whole thing about baseball.
I don't think so. I think that's
yeah. You guys are just too namby-pamby.
Okay. You willing to make the change? We'll figure it out. That's bottom line. The stadiums, there's 150 ballparks that need major attention on independent netting councils, engineers, architects. They need to come in and tell baseball and those ballparks where the nets need to go, how high, how far, how wide. Because as Mark is saying, all those balls are knowingly going into the seats. They know in advance that X amount of balls are going at 100, X amount of balls are going at 80, X amount of balls are going high, wide, and far.
Right.
Get in the independent netting council. Yeah. And don't worry about the ground rule double, Bob.
Yeah. Well, you know, the reason I brought that up was because when we did our first interview on the Lean to the Left podcast, I got a lot of comment from people that said, "Oh, what are you, another nanny? What do they call it?"
Yeah. Sissy, get off your phone.
Yeah.
Blame
Come
the
on,
fan.
You want to protect us from everything.
You know,
the 10-year-old's ready for Little League at 100. I mean, come on.
Yeah.
What is that?
But I saw those comments.
Yeah, but I have another question for you.
Sure.
And that is, the Major League Baseball clubs have the financial wherewithal to do this. They also need to be doing it, providing protection according to your theory in the minor league stadiums.
Yeah,
too,
well,
right?
my research. Yeah, at least
what's
42
going on
ballparks.
with that? Yeah.
Well, at least 42 ballparks have no nets past end of dugouts. Where did that little girl get unfortunately crushed? Past the end of the dugout.
Yeah.
What else
What
can I
about
say?
colleges and high schools?
I haven't looked into colleges or independents or high schools. I don't know if they have a net this high, that far. I haven't looked into it.
The netting in Major League Baseball is going to change everything over a rather, in my opinion, a rather quick period of time. Once netting is deemed necessary in the major leagues, the liability that Jordan is looking for, is going to be almost a gimme to those people or to those stadiums that don't have netting. The only negative, by the way, about netting, and it's only this, is the case he was talking about. Once you take the step of creating a netted environment and you make people feel that they're safer, when the netting fails, your liability is even worse because you've made people feel safe and they're not. You've got a defective net or whatever, but you have to know about it. So where this is going in the future, I think, is balls get through the netting, and people and baseball stadiums rather, or baseball teams being liable for
that may have been the case in Illinois 40 years ago, where the Cubs did not appeal and they gave the guy the $63,000. It was a case, Dale Yates, who sued the Cubs, not Major League Baseball.
It got through the net.
That's apparently why I think the Cubs did not appeal the decision and they gave him the 63. But I don't believe that'll be the issue in Japan. Meaning, occasionally, if there's 53,000 foul balls a year and 20 something thousand of them make the seats, is from what some foul ball website guys said. A third of them make the seats. Not all the foul balls make the seats, but let's say a third of them do, whatever it may be, close to a third or more than a third. If one gets through, great. That would be a lot. It's not supposed to go through. It's I'm not saying a ball is a brick wall, a net is a brick wall, but if you throw a ball against a solid net and it's maintained, maybe one will get through. So I don't think it's a regular thing. If you throw a ball against a brick wall, it's not going to go through the brick wall. Right. Not that a brick wall is a net. But that being said, I think the main issue is those folks who have been hurt 40 years ago, 30 years ago, 20 years ago, based on the NBC study, I haven't heard from 1,000 people that have been slammed by foul balls who felt bitter and never got their bill paid for and never got anywhere in court. Those folks are going to be like, why now? Why not then? Baseball knew in advance. That's why I believe, as Mark is alluding to, you never heard Manfred or any of the lawyers in baseball use the word mandate. I think there's some buzz word about them not using that word. Don't use that word mandate. We're mandating netting. We're suggesting the clubs move the nets. Each team has to do it based on their architectural structure. It's a complicated matter. So obviously Rob Manfred's a very intelligent lawyer who came onto the job 7 years ago. And all of their stock responses when asked by the media are ready to go, that kind of thing. They're not going to open themselves up for liability. I just believe they just haven't dealt with this. And it's been, sometimes the cover up is worse than the actual incident. And that's basically what I hope to expose in the book.
The point I was making earlier, though, is that contributory negligence, the old standard, is what I would call a drop-dead defense. If the plaintiff is responsible at all, he collects nothing. And the point I was making is that only 4 states, back in 1910, almost every state was a contributory negligence state. Today, only 4 are. So the idea that comparative negligence applies, even at a 50-50 standard, gives your fan, your cause, a much better chance of success than, and I don't mean from a safety standpoint, I mean from a negligence collection of damages standpoint. I'm all for netting. I don't want to see people get hurt. But if they get hurt, I want to see them compensated. And laws like this and games that they play, like this whole mandate versus recommendation,
right?
It's all gamesmanship.
Yep.
The hot coffee case in the McDonald's case. What a joke that was. It wasn't that some poor woman stupid spilled coffee on herself. It was that McDonald's manipulated the temperature on purpose to make it scalding hot so that it would be warm when you got it back to your office.
Yes.
None of that stuff got publicized, only the fact that this poor woman spilled it on herself. And what a stupid woman she was. And this is the same damn thing.
Right. Like you just informing me, I knew little about that case. Now I know 99% more than I did. So there you go.
They're almost identical situations.
Interesting. Very interesting.
The woman had no reason to expect that the coffee would be that hot.
Got it.
Just like the fan has no reason to expect that you're going to get hit by a ball, or at less reason to expect it than the stadium does. That's my point.
That's what I'm saying too. Exactly.
The level of knowledge, the level of responsibility if you compare the fan, and this is where comparative negligence comes in. If you compare the fan to the team knows much more about this than the fan does. Right?
Yes.
And to me, that's the best argument you have going forward versus 1910 versus the baseball.
That's I'll certainly keep that in mind. Clearly, baseball's been conveying their information through microprint. And obviously, if that microprint ever made it up on the scoreboard, people would be saying, should we be here? It would heighten their awareness. Is this a place for families? Nobody in their right mind today is looking at the microprint, which you can't even find. You have to go deep down on your phone in your e-ticket to find those baseball clauses.
I think you're going to see the pendulum start to swing the other way. The other point about netting is you're now the team owner. You have netting. How do you blame the fan now? He's sitting in this seat, the same seat that he would have gotten hit without the net. He's got a right now, doesn't he, to expect that he's not going to get hit because there's a protective net, right?
Sure.
So now the risk is almost minuscule versus low before. The argument used to be, well, we can't protect against all risk. This is a very low risk. Now it's a minuscule risk. So if it gets through the net, they've done something bad.
Well, if it's maintained, it should be 99% plus effective. So certainly, it would be, we're ready for change. The folks that have been victimized by foul balls, they've been speaking about it. They don't want it to happen to anyone else. They would love acknowledgement from 40 years ago, 30 years ago, including Erwin Goldblum, who I've talked to in these virtual press conferences at least 7 times. They just don't want it to happen to anyone else. And they deserve that. And they deserve to be welcomed back to the game. And the only way they'll accept it is if there was a prevention plan in place, finally, that would be preventing these injuries.
When we come back from this message, Jordan will talk about what happens in Japan with respect to the problem of foul ball safety. Stay tuned.
In Japan, they do have nets. They do have occasional injuries, but the culture is so out front about the netting manner. The nets certainly are much further down, higher, farther, wider. And when the balls do come into the sections, let's say down the lines on an arc, not at 90 or 100 on a straight path, they'll blow whistles. They'll tell you, heads up, put your head between your legs, whatever you need to do. But that's their specific job. On every aisle, there's some team attendant. They'll even show, some may say distasteful, but animation up on the scoreboard of a cartoon guy getting hit with a ball and being rushed off to the hospital, because they want to get the message across to the folks that keep your eyes open. It helps. And they even provide excitement seats for those that want to flirt with danger and death. Some sections are actually allowing adults. I'm sure it's only adults.
Does the Japanese system compensate fans in situations where
I think there was some compensation case once, but it's not on the regularity that it's in America. Just to finish my point about the excitement seats, they'll provide you a glove and a helmet to sit in a section which you will be flirting with danger and death. I would doubt they allow children to come along with their parents on that. And so it's just a more transparent, it's respect, it's dignity. And here they've been pulling the wool over our eyes with this micro print, which nobody ever reads and pays attention to. Fans realizing this now, they realize, and even this delayed fan that just comes into the games every few years, when they learn about this, they're going to be like, you mean every time we could have been part of a weekly or a bi-weekly emergency room statistic as we were coming to the games with our growing families? And unfortunately, the answer is yes. I mean, the NBC study in itself was very powerful from 2019. It implies 700 injuries from 4 teams over 8 years. So if you put the other 26 together, it's roughly 4,500, 5,000 people reported to first aid. And in a 26.5-week season, over 8 seasons, that's 208 weeks. We're talking about 20 to 25 people that reported to first aid a week on the major league level. The 3 times as many more games in the minor league levels with less netting. I can only imagine. What was it, 75 or 100? This is all me speculation, hypothetical. But 20 to 25 people who reported to first aid, how many of them had a concussion or a head injury? Maybe 1. And is that a conservative number? Probably. I don't want to say 7. I'd rather just say 1. Because let us do some more research and find out. And I do know Kelsey McKinney did something in 2019, the last regular season that we had. She's from Deadspin. I don't know if they're still up and running, but she documented 15 serious injuries in a 26.5 week season in 2019. And that's too much. So we could split hairs, but the numbers are great. And that's the bottom line.
I want to ask you in a second about the response to your advocacy and the people who you're reaching, but I want to make one more point about assumption of risk and there's a lot of distractions going on at a stadium. A vendor comes by and offers you a hot dog, and while you're dealing with the vendor, you get hit in the head with a ball.
Sure.
The scoreboard starts flashing and they want you to look at that.
Exactly.
The water fountain goes off and they want you to look at that. It's not as cut and dry as I chose to sit there. I ought to watch out for myself. They're deliberately putting distractions in front of you that can cause injuries like this as well. But tell me about your advocacy, who you're advocating to. Are you going to, for instance, state and federal legislatures and trying to change the law? Tell me what's going on.
Well, absolutely. So, I got excited in 2019 when I first got started. Senator Dick Durbin and Senator Tammy Duckworth. I think Durbin had met with some of the family members, some people that I know, some people who I'm not familiar with or I haven't had any relationship with, victims of foul balls. And supposedly it made some it was a big article in the New York Times. Supposedly transparency was on the way. Baseball was going to provide the fans more transparency. What that would meant, or what that was going to come out to, was more about. Durbin said fans should know where they should be sitting, where it's safe to sit, where the injuries are occurring, whatever. Threw him a couple of cream puffs. 2021 comes around. Durbin and Manfred meet again. There's some more meetings, and I'm like, according to the Sports Illustrated article, August 10th, Matt Martell, foul balls. They had another meeting in 2021, and again, my first question was, okay, where's the transparency from 2019? Never came through. Durbin said something to Matt Martell in the article, like, we're not going to take any delay tactics. We're serious. Manfred supposedly has an internal investigation going on about where the Nets should be, yada, yada, yada. Another kick the can down the road tactic by Durbin and Manfred. So what I've done, if you saw some of the stunts I've pulled, I wrote a letter to the Illinois governor. I flew a plane over Peoria, Illinois, where there were no nets at all above the dugout. They were the worst of the minor leagues, where if you saw my video at foulballsafetynow.com about a ball going in between two guys in 2014, 2015 in Tampa, it could have been bloody mess end of baseball in Tampa Bay that year. You would have saw how graphic and disgusting that would have been. But it missed them both by an inch, so back to eating popcorn and drinking beer. So no big deal. But that's more or less where we're at. The State of the Union is horrible based on what I've learned about the minor leagues. We certainly need public policy. We certainly need somebody who wants to join me for stunts and other things like lobbying, because it needs to happen. I don't have millions of dollars to start lobbying and changing laws and mandating, to get these guys to introduce things that are going to make the baseball act accordingly. So not a lot is happening. It's piecemeal, it's slow, but the minor leagues, it's like the Flint, Michigans of the world. Nobody cares about their water system.
Isn't that something?
That's what it is.
You mentioned Dick Durbin.
Yep.
What exactly was that legislation supposed to do?
It wasn't legislation. It was asking MLB. It was a 2019 New York Times article asking Manfred and MLB to provide transparency. And according to the 2021 article, when Manfred and Durbin connected again over the summer, nothing was mentioned like, well, whatever happened to the 2019 follow-up? Did MLB ever come through and share their transparency as you requested?
Jordan, can you define that term for me, though? Transparency related.
Durbin in 2019 was strongly implying that MLB needs to provide transparency to families and fans on where it's safe to sit,
where you should not sit,
where the most frequent occurrences of injuries are coming, what sections. And as far as I saw from the Matt Martell Sports Illustrated article on foul balls, they met again, or they had communication again this past summer in 2021, whether Matt is a young reporter and didn't want to ask Durbin while he was interviewing him, like, hey, whatever happened in the 2019 from this big New York Times article? I don't see any updates on it. What's the deal, Senator? But he didn't really put it to him. So I believe it's kicking the can down the road. There's nothing happening. Let's not kid ourselves. Maiming is just around the corner.
This is where the law and justice comes in. You're looking at a situation where if they took aggressive steps to make Major League Baseball or minor league baseball or the owner of the park liable for damages caused by these kinds of events, Do you think more safety measures would be implemented?
That's what it is. I think the wholesome image of baseball, it's coming to an end, courtesy of hopefully a lot of guys like me that will continue talking about this. And once families realize that they attended the games with their growing families in the 70s, 80s, 90s, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Did you have any idea that you could have been part of a weekly or a biweekly emergency room statistic? And once those families know that, they're going to be like, shit, we were having good times under false pretenses. That ain't cool. Sorry to cloud your memories, folks, but that's just the way it is. Let's get on with it. And let's try to do the right thing. Nobody likes it, but they all suppress it. I've interviewed a couple of ESPN announcers. I've interviewed a couple of Fox cameramen, one Fox cameraman, a few minor leaguers who tell their own families to sit behind nets and who probably feel terrible knowing that they're in a community that will do the maiming. Obviously, there's 5,000 or so minor leaguers. Most of them won't be singled out as the one who does the maiming, but I think collectively they probably all feel pretty crappy knowing that somebody on their team or in their league is going to crush somebody this week or next. And that ain't a good community to be in. I wouldn't want to be in it.
Well, how about those guys? I mean, they're like sitting ducks. The cameraman, above the dugout or just to the what is it, right?
Yep.
At the dugout. That guy.
I got one powerful story.
That guy needs combat pay.
Yeah, he was the whistleblower of the bunch, and he came and he talked to us. I'm working with a guy by the name of Brendan, who's a professional writer, and we're really coming along. We have a lot of impact statements from victims of foul balls, at least 6 or 7, probably upwards about 10 now. And we have really some solid interviews, and I believe people will be finding us and wanting to share their impact statements. And how many hundreds of thousands of people with head injuries over the last 50 years? We're giving them a platform for feeling like they can share their story. They don't watch baseball anymore. They're bitter. They don't even want their kids playing baseball when 15 years later, when they become parents. I mean, you hear these experiences. It's a lot of anxiety for those victims.
This sounds almost like the football helmet situation.
Yeah, well, this is the fans, And
no, but I mean, I don't want my kid playing football anymore.
Yeah. Well, no.
Or hockey.
This lady Jenny, who lost her eye in 1979 at Shea Stadium, who interviewed with me for the book. She was 14 at the time. Years later, she was relieved when her son chose not to stay in baseball, play baseball. It's almost like, oh, I'm so relieved. And it's like, that ain't cool. And then people who've been hurt, they don't watch the game anymore. They don't want to go back to the game anymore. They're bitter. They got disrespected by the team. And baseball is probably encouraging their teams not to communicate with the fan. And they can't even be decent about it. And their apologies are not genuine. So these fans will not take their apology unless it's prevented, and it won't happen to anyone else. That's when Jenny probably would be ready to say, okay, baseball finally did the right thing 42 years later. And my grandchildren, I will now encourage them to play baseball. She certainly didn't want her children to. So, hey, that's where it's at, my friends. We got to do something about it.
Have you also been involved in hockey and pucks going into the stands?
No, I wrote something in the book. I'm not giving Bettman too much credit because he came along in 1993. And how many close calls were there before little Brittany got killed in 2002? And they put the net up right away. And then I spoke to a netting company up in Canada, and she suggested you should do some investigation in Canada. She didn't say that. She basically said some of the stadiums don't have the netting that you would think, and some do. So you got to go, because they have minor league hockey throughout Canada. I don't know, so whatever. He was there to fix their business. And a little girl died. And they took care of it right away. And, good. They took care of it in the following season right away. And it's probably no more people getting shaved with pucks at 90 or 100 like they used to. And it finally hit somebody. What do you think was going to happen? So I can't give people credit.
There's an episode of Friends where David Schwimmer gets hit in the mouth with a puck.
Oh, does he? Okay.
Yes,
I haven't seen that one. Okay.
How do our listeners make contact with you? Where do they go to discover your advocacy? Where do they go to help your cause?
Sure. Yeah. Anyone wants to have a conversation or sign a petition? There's two: one to repeal the baseball rule, one for more nets. They go hand in hand. But please go to foulballsafetynow.com. And certainly, if you know anyone who's been injured or had an experience with a ball, wants to talk off the record, on the record, it's all fine. And like I said, if there's anybody out there who has a few dollars, wants to make a statement with me, wants to put their heads together, let's make some statements. Let's try to get others involved and get people to move public policy along, because it needs to be. So thank you.
Well, I know some very aggressive lawyers who would grab a case like this and help you by making them liable for damages for what they're doing.
I appreciate that. That's tremendous.
So reach out and I'll put you in touch with somebody if you've got a person who was seriously hurt like that.
Yeah, I mean, there's cases how old they are and statute of limitations, but I have a handful of people and I keep meeting new people. So even just establish a relationship with an attorney or two is a good thing.
The other thing you should know about with kids is that the statute of limitations is extended. So
good.
It might not have run if it's a kid. Last question.
Sure.
You're writing a book, or you wrote a book.
The book is coming along. Yeah, the book is being script doctored and edited by people that I know, and everyone's saying, hey, we should leave this out. Hey, we should put this there. We should put that here. So yeah, I mean, if there's any publishers out there that publish books for a living, you'll probably want to know that we have an epiphany of outrage. We have all the ingredients that make up a book, and if they're into producing books, then they should be calling us and say, help us shape this book, tell the story.
There's a little company named Amazon that
yeah. Well, everything requires momentum. Everything requires momentum. So I'm not going to put the book out until I feel like it's going to move. I don't mind giving out a book or a chapter but I need guidance, and we need. But in the meanwhile, it's all good. I keep on collecting new stories and just kind of going into the salad bowl. We got plenty of all kinds of ingredients in that salad. So any help along the way is great. It's coming out sooner or later. Discussion is certainly always happening. So that's really important.
Okay. This has been a very interesting topic. I appreciate your coming on and your time. And I really wish you luck with the crusade.
Thank you, Mark and Rob.
Thank you, Jordan. I really.
Yeah, and Bob.
Yeah, that's
sorry,
all right.
Rob. We'll call Rob tomorrow. Bob.
I really do appreciate you joining us today on Justice Counts. It was an interesting and fascinating conversation, and Mark and I are grateful. So Hey, and thanks everybody for listening. And you know what? If you haven't already done so, you ought to check out Mark Bellows' Rip from the Headlines legal thrillers. They're all available on Amazon and other major online booksellers. He's got quite the hero in this guy, attorney Zachary Blake. And you know what, Mark? Maybe you ought to have Zachary Blake do a baseball case.
Zachary Blake would kick ass in this case. I'm telling you.
Zachary fights for justice on all fronts. Mark's books are Betrayal of Faith, Betrayal of Justice, Betrayal in Blue, Betrayal in Black, Betrayal High, and Supreme Betrayal. And Mark, you ought to do one, Betrayal in Red, about Trump. Anyway,
Betrayal at the Border. Betrayal at the Border.
I know, I was just about to say that. I had to get that thing in there about Trump, though. Anyway, Betrayal at the Border just came out. If you want more information, just check barkandbellow.com. Until
Betrayal of Justice is about a bigoted president who wants to ban all Muslims and blames Mexicans for bringing crime and drugs.
Yeah, so
So I've already written that book. That's
I know
2.
that, but I want you to do a book called Betrayal in Red. You know, red for Republicans.
All right.
Anyway,
write me an outline.
Until next time, this is Bob Gaddy for Mark Bella, signing off from Justice Counts.